For today's video, I've just been leafing through a few from my collection of vintage cookbooks from various parts of the 20th century, and I thought we'd just pick a recipe out of one of these today and just try it out. So I'm looking for a savoury recipe for dinner today. So this one's called It's Fun to Entertain. I did a whole video about this book. This is a book that was created to train people to start enjoying food in a social context again. After the austerity that came from rationing and just the impact of World War II. This book's published a little way afterwards, but the impact of the war on British cuisine was such that people had to learn how to party with food all over again. And so this has got things like 20th century beef stew, which sounds great. Just rather simple beef stew. Corned beef dumplings in a rich brown sauce. I think we'll try that one sometime. Roast stuffed chicken and Hunter's chicken stew. So that's that one. This is by the same author, Gwen Marchant. This is It's Fun to Cook Continental Dishes. And continental in this context is just foreign. It's not just about the European continent. This has got recipes from Europe, but it's also got recipes from the United States and China and Indian dishes and so on. A lot of these are very much English interpretations of those things. For example, the paella recipe calls for Uncle Ben Italian rice, which would cause horror for Spanish people. I'm certain it's the wrong kind of rice for that dish, but yeah, a lot of this was based on what you could get in England at the time when this book was published. We've got the Austerity cookbook. This one was published, let's have a look, in 1975. Well, this edition might be 1977, I think. Is this arrow? Yes. So this edition, 1977, but first published in 1975. And this is a book that collects together recipes from the Ministry of Food that was publishing cheap recipes for dealing with the austerity of rationing. And I think they call on other sources as well, where food was scarce and people had to make do. So there's lots of interesting recipes in here. So there's lots of fish recipes, fried herrings in oatmeal. Lots of herring recipes, actually. I assume that's because herring probably was still in plentiful supply because it could be fished in our waters. Interesting recipe in here for, I think I've mentioned this before actually, almondigos, which is a meatball recipe from Scotland apparently, but almondigos is a very similar sounding word to Spanish albondigas, which is meatballs, so there must be a connection here. This one calls for a dozen stoned raisins, but I think that might be talking about some other kind of dried fruit because a dozen raisins is not many. That might have been prunes or something like that. There is a lot of conflation of terms when it comes to dried fruits in old recipes. Mock hare, made from stewing steak and bacon. Carbonade of beef. Instant jevec. Interesting recipes in here. And then there's Traditional British Cooking for Pleasure by Gladys Mann. And again, published 1967. And again, this is very traditional British recipes, British cooking. So anyway, I'm going to have a leaf through these books and pick out a recipe that we're going to try today. Right, so this is the recipe I've decided we're going to make. Paupiettes of lamb's liver. So this is, we wash the liver, cut it into very thin slices, a little smaller than the rashers of bacon. On each rasher, lay a slice of liver. Season it with a little salt, pepper and lemon juice. Sprinkle with thyme or marjoram. Roll up with the bacon on the outside and secure little rolls with small skewers or string if you have no skewers. Heat the butter in a frying pan and saute the paupiettes. Sprinkle in the flour and stir in the red wine, let it bubble for a few minutes, then add either fresh tomatoes or tomato sauce. So I think that's just like stewed tomatoes. I'll have a look. Actually, there's a separate recipe for the tomato sauce, but you can just use chopped tomatoes. Stir gently, add the stock, cover the pan and cook very gently for about 10 minutes. So it's lamb's liver and bacon rolled up in little rolls and pinned, and then fried and then stewed in tomatoes and wine. It sounds like it should be really nice. So I'm going to go shopping, get the ingredients for this, and then we'll head down to the kitchen and make this. All right, ingredients by the book. Half a pound or 250 grams of lamb's liver. I've actually got about 460 grams here, so I won't use all of this. 250 grams of bacon. It doesn't say what kind, except rashers of bacon, which is what we've got, slices. 4 tomatoes or a small cup of tomato sauce, freshly made, page 178. Well, over on page 178, there's a recipe for thick tomato sauce, and it's basically a seasoned tomato sauce with garlic and small onion in it. I have approximated that with garlic and chives and some tinned tomatoes. 1 glass of red wine. So got some sulfite-free wine here, so Jenny can have this. Kindly given to us by some friends. 1/4 of a pint of meat stock. This is my homemade chicken, well actually homemade stock made from a mixture of different things. Chicken, turkey, lamb and pork bones. 1/2 ounce of flour. 1 ounce of butter. Lemon juice. Fresh marjoram. This is from the garden. Marjoram is related to oregano. And salt and freshly ground black pepper and small skewers. I've got some cocktail sticks here. Right, let's get going. The first thing it says to do is to wash the liver and cut it into very thin slices, a little smaller than the rashers of bacon. So I'm going to take some of this liver out of the pack. I don't know that I'm going to wash it because, bear in mind, these instructions were written in the 1960s where you'd be buying the liver from the butchers. It would come home wrapped in paper. This liver here has already been processed. I mean, I could wash it. I think it's just going to make it more slippery and difficult to handle. Actually, before we go any further, I'm just going to get this wine open, let that breathe a little bit. Okay, so we've got some wine set aside for the recipe. We've also got a little glass of wine for the cook. Now, there's going to be a few things going on here, and once my hands get covered in the juices of the liver, I'm going to not be able to do certain things. So let's get prepared. I'm going to get the lemon ready, get some cocktail sticks out so that I don't have to contaminate the whole pot of cocktail sticks with my messy hands. What else? I'm going to get some herbs chopped, just the leafy bits. So the bacon is, yeah, the book doesn't say what type of bacon to use. This is streaky. I'm wondering actually, because you have to wrap things up in bacon, whether actually back bacon might have been a better choice because you get bigger rashers. But anyway, and this is the lamb's liver, and the packaging on these is always a bit weird. There's a kind of double layer of film here, so we have to pierce through both lots. Now I've got to slice this thin. It is already sliced, but I don't think that's as thin as the recipe wants. So I'm going to try to slice it again, being very careful of my fingers. This would be easier if it wasn't supplied sliced, but this is all I could get. Okay, I don't think my presentation here is going to be as neat as the book would specify. Let's try assembling one of these things. So I want a rasher of bacon, and I'm supposed to put the liver on so it doesn't quite come to the edges, like that maybe. Maybe a little bit more there. And then, can you see what I'm doing here? Yeah, you can. Okay. And then we roll that up like that and secure with a stick. Well, that kind of works. It's just little rolls of liver and bacon. So what we're making here is going to be a bit like a liver and bacon casserole, really, except that it's a bit more fancy in its presentation, maybe, or it's supposed to be. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up. Now, I think that's possibly a largish piece of liver for what we're doing here, but let's see what that looks like. Oh, I forgot the marjoram. We'll do that on this bit. So, a bit of marjoram on there. I think I meant to do salt and pepper as well, but I'm not going to get my messy hands all over the pepper mill. I think we'll season them when they're on the plate. Well, I'll tell you what, this is quite a fiddle. So you know, in terms of austerity cookbook, there might well be some economy here, or at least in the context of when the book was published, because the cost of ingredients does change as time moves on. But assuming these were cheap ingredients when this book was published, you know, ingredient wise this would be a cheap dish, but preparation wise this is a lot of faff. It's too thick, that piece of liver, so let's go through at an angle so that I'm not going to slice my fingers off. Bit of the marjoram. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera off now anyway. That's the process. We are rolling up liver, lamb's liver slices inside bacon to make little rolls. All right, well, for better or for worse, that job is done. So there are my paupiettes. I don't think they're as neat as they should be. I think they're as neat as I can possibly make them, given the current constraints. I only used about half the liver, so that's about right. The rest of that will go in the freezer. So that's been seasoned with a bit of salt and pepper now. That should have gone inside, but it hasn't. And then just a little kind of drizzle of lemon juice across the top, which is going to wash off some of the seasoning, but it's all good. Right. Okay, I think we're ready to start cooking. So over here at the cooker, we get the pan warmed, and we now need to saute those little bacon and liver rolls in some butter. This pan's a bit of an odd one, so as soon as the butter starts to sizzle, the pan needs to go down to a low heat because this thing retains a lot of heat. But while we're waiting for that, cheers. That's very nice. Okay, butter is starting to sizzle already, which means the pan is getting hot. So that pan's going to go down to halfway. This Vision pyroceramic pan does need special treatment like that. But that now means these paupiettes can go in. And we are to saute these, I presume, until they're brown. So we'll turn them a little bit as well. In the oven, I've got some sliced vegetables which have been baking in a cheese sauce, which is going to be my accompaniment for this meal. So these are starting to brown on one side, so I'm just going to try and turn them so they get cooked on a different side. I suspect once they've got browning on two sides, we're going to have to probably pull the skewers out and just turn them. Getting some good browning here. It's a little uneven across the pan, so what I'll do is I'll just make sure that the ones on the edge get a turn in the middle. Sorry about that, the camera wasn't rolling, but what I've actually just done is sprinkled in the flour because we've got everything browned, and I'm just going to turn it over now so the flour gets a little bit of frying in the butter. That's good, because the next thing is the wine. Every time I do that, people fret about putting cold liquid into hot glass. This pan is not glass. It's a pyroceramic material that has a negative coefficient of expansion, so it doesn't go boom, basically, when you put liquid in it when it's hot. Anyway, so you've got to sizzle that for a little bit. I'll just give it a little jiggle on the bottom, really to try to deglaze the pan a bit if we can. And now we add the tomatoes. And then finally the stock. Just give that a little stir around so it's got some kind of homogeneity. Right, there we go. And then we cover that and simmer it for 10 minutes. Right, we're now at a point where I can remove the skewers. 16 skewers went in, so I will count 16 skewers out. Not that there's really very much risk of biting into one of these because they do go right the way through the little parcels of meat, but better safe than sorry is the phrase, isn't it? I'm just simmering this with the lid off now, just to thicken it up a little bit as well. That's the last one there. Right, let's have a little count up. 12, 13, 14, 15. So, by my count, there's still a skewer in there somewhere. So, oh, there it is. There we go. 16. Okay, so that's my vegetable bake with cheese sauce. If you want the recipe for that, by the way, do let me know in the comments and we'll do this as a separate video. And then this is the Paupiettes of lamb's liver.
That's good.
Is that enough for now?
Yeah.
Right, well, here we go. Yeah, he was hoping over there. The sauce is delightfully thick and rich looking. I'll just add a few peas because I feel like we did need something green on the plate. There's a lot of vegetables in the bake. There's parsnips, cauliflower, carrots, potato. Right, well. So, the liver, well, interestingly, the liver's still slightly pink inside, but that's probably by design. I think that's a bit on the salty side. I don't think it needed the salt because the bacon's salty, but it's a tasty liver and bacon casserole. Presentation's a little bit more fancy than we would normally be accustomed to, that's all. Thoughts, Jenny?
Yeah, it's alright. Very nice. Yeah, it is a bit salty, but
Yeah.
did you add
Well,
salt in it?
I followed the instructions to the letter,
Oh.
which said to put salt and pepper on the things, but the bacon's already salty, so actually with the other things it's okay, isn't it?
Mm.
Have it together.
Unless it's an old book. They weren't too worried about salt and stuff, were they?
Mm. But it's a nice, rich gravy.
Yeah.
I don't think we normally have wine in a liver casserole, and it does make you wonder, actually, if this is the Austerity cookbook, why is there wine in here? Wine, it's not that cheap of a set of ingredients by modern standards. I think pig's liver is probably cheaper than lamb's liver these days, but it's very good. And so I made 16 of these little things, and that would easily serve 4 people, because 4 of these is quite a generous serving when it's got all the tasty sauce with it. I think in that respect it does stretch the ingredients a bit. So just some closing thoughts on that. So I think if I was going to make that again, I wouldn't season the things. I wouldn't add any extra salt. If you're using really salty bacon, by my sensibilities anyway, although when it's all mixed together it's quite nice. There's a lot of really lovely robust flavour in there, and as a result it's satisfying without having to come back for seconds. So that might be certainly one way in which it works in an austerity context. It's a recipe that actually has got a powerful flavour, so you don't feel like you need to eat a ton of it to be satisfied. The other thing to note is that it didn't have a pronounced flavour of offal. Now, part of that is just because it's lamb's liver, and that is a mild tasting form of offal. But I think wrapping it in the bacon, cooking it with tomatoes and herbs and wine has just spread the flavour of the liver into a really robust sauce. So if you were a person who says they don't like liver but would like to get to like it, that might be a way to introduce yourself to it, because it didn't taste powerfully of offal. It was very robust and deeply savoury, but not in a gamey or unpleasant way. Anyway, that was lamb's liver Paupiettes from the Austerity cookbook. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.